Mornings are so important. They set the trajectory for your entire day. They set the stage. They establish your mood. And to some extent, the things that happen later on in the day that maybe go wrong, they could have looked totally different had you not had this crazy morning to begin with. So, we're going to be talking about how to help mornings not be such a chaotic mess. And I'm guessing that you might have tried working on this before and it hasn't worked. And I know exactly why what you've tried before hasn't worked. So, I'm going to be unpacking that for you as well. So, buckle up, be ready to take notes. Let's jump in. Well, hey there, I am Jennifer Roskamp, a certified life coach and homeschool mom of 9 who is passionate about helping women just like you embrace the here and now while also being focused on creating the life you actually want. In reality, it's not about thinking life will get so much better or so much easier when you fill in the blank. Let's work on creating a life you love now. So let's dive in and get started on redefining Supermom to be someone who is present, intentional, and content rather than perfect in our homes, in our lives, and in our own skin. Let's get started. This is the Intentional Mom Podcast. So whether we're talking about mornings, trying to make mornings run more smoothly, or anything else that isn't really working well, you've got to solve the actual problem, not treat the symptoms. And so when I say if you've tried working with your mornings before and it hasn't worked, whatever you've tried hasn't worked well, if mornings are still a struggle, well, the reason why, again, is because you're trying to treat the symptoms of the problem. You're not actually fixing the problem. And so we're going to talk about that. You actually need to diagnose the problem. You need to understand why the mornings are such a dumpster fire for you. Your morning situation looks different from mine. And so that's why it's important for me to give you the correct questions and the correct information so that you can unpack what is happening with your mornings. So that's where we're going to be starting. So this actually is a simple 3-step process, and we're going to unpack that. And I'm also going to give you an example or two along the way so that you'll know how to apply it. It's not just going to be a formula that you're left to work with. So let's look at what this is in this simple process. All right. So the first thing you're going to need is a simple piece of paper. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can have lines. It doesn't have to have lines. It literally can just be a piece of paper. And you're going to want to essentially divide it down the middle with a line, right? You want a left column and you want a right column. So that's where you're starting. Just this piece of paper, 2 columns on it. What you're doing on the left column, in the left column is you're going to number 1, this is step number 1, you're going to write down all of the issues with your mornings. What is it, right? What are the struggle points? And again, this goes on the left side of the paper. So you might say, I struggle getting out of bed. You might say, I struggle with getting my kids out of bed. You might say, I struggle with getting everybody out the door on time. You might say, I struggle with the disaster that's left in the house with everybody running all over the place. So you decide, you unpack in number 1, you unpack what your specific struggles, what are the outcomes, what are the experiences, what are the results that you're having with your morning that you're saying, these do not work well, and I want to fix these things. What are those things? You're going to write them down. And you got to figure this out on paper first. That's why I'm telling you to get this paper. So I get it. You're probably saying, just tell me how to fix it. I don't want to write stuff down. Here's why you've got to write these things down. I've got 2 reasons. The first reason is because I always say when we have to figure something out, when we have to problem solve, it's kind of like a puzzle. In order to put a puzzle together, you have to dump to do it effectively and not take forever in a day, you've got to dump all the pieces out, right? Think about when you're going to solve a puzzle. You got to dump all the puzzle pieces out, and you've got to flip over the pieces so that you can see all of the picture side of the puzzle, right? The cardboard on the other side, not helpful when you're trying to put a puzzle together. So putting this on paper, writing these things out on paper is much like trying to solve a puzzle where you've got to dump all the pieces out, you've got to have them all, you've got to flip them all over so that you have a clear visual of what you're working with. It's also, by the way, really helpful to have that picture of what the puzzle looks like when you're finished. Also something that putting things on paper can help you do. So that's reason number one, is that it's kind of like putting a puzzle together. It's that same theory of what happens when we are trying to put together a puzzle. The second reason that you want to put things out on paper is because when you put things out on paper, again, it's easier to see things that will not work, right? A lot of times, until we see them right in front of us on paper, we really have no idea why things aren't connecting, why things aren't working well, where there's holes in things, where there's missing pieces. And when we get them all out on paper, well, that's when we can start to see some of these things. And the reality is that if you can't get something, whether we're talking about mornings or clutter or whatever else, if you can't get something to work on paper first, well, then you know it's not going to work in real life. So you don't have to go through all of the hassle of the real life trying it out when you take the time to figure it out on paper and see, does this actually work? Is this going to work for me? So for example, one of the things when someone started using my intentional mom planning system, when someone started using that, she filled out the first page. And the first page she chose to fill out was the waking time worksheet. And so she filled out the waking time worksheet, and which essentially takes you through a math formula. And it basically looks at all the things you need to get done. It looks at what your end time is, right? What's your end point? When do you need to be out the door? When do the kids need to be on the bus? Whatever that end point is, what is that? What time are you getting up? And all these things have to fit inside. And for her, when she filled that out and saw what time she was getting up, in the morning, what time her end point needed to be, and all the stuff that needed to fit in, she said, when I put it all down on paper, I could see why my mornings are so hectic. I was trying to cram in the work. I was giving myself, one person, so much to do that it would take 5 people to accomplish what I was trying to do, but I never saw it until I got it out on paper. And that's the beauty of writing it all down. So that's step number 1, is to write it down in the left column. What are all your sticking, messy, hard things with mornings? You're going to write those, okay? The second step is now on the right column of the paper. So across, right, we've got your list going down the page in the left. So across from everything that you wrote, now you're going to say who or what causes this issue. Who or what causes or plays a role. Sometimes it's not an exact correlation. So essentially what you're saying is, why does this happen? This is what you're trying to identify on the right side. So again, I'm going to run through an example in a few minutes, but know that the more thoroughly that you think through these things, especially this right-hand column, the more thoroughly you do your uncovering detective work here, the more efficiently and more quickly you're going to experience some relief with your mornings, because that's what we're trying to do here, right? So the right side, you're going to go and you're going to look at the left side, and on that right side, you're going to directly write directly across the page, what causes this? And if you need more room, branch out onto some more paper, okay? But you're essentially trying to say, why is this happening? Why is always the way that we solve problems? Because all problems start somewhere. And that's what we're doing right here on the right-hand side of the column, is we're finding out why my mornings are such a mess. And remember, way back in the beginning, I said that's what we need to do. We need to diagnose the problem. Well, the right-hand column is that diagnosis. And so that's what we're doing. So again, take your time here. Try to uncover all of the different contributing factors that can be causing these undesirable results with your morning. Whatever these sticking and messy points are, we want to understand why they're there in the first place, because when we understand that, well, then we know how to fix them. And that brings me to the third step. What are the solutions? So now you've got your left column. You understand, you've named the problem. On the right side, you've identified, why is this a problem? And when you know that why, well, then now you can say, all right, how do I fix this then? What are the solutions? So here are some easy solutions, okay? Here are some things you might uncover. I've got four different ways that you could come up with some solutions here. Okay. Way number 1 is easy solutions. Some of the things that you list will not be complicated solutions. They will be very easy for you to identify. They will be very easy for you to figure out. Oh, this offsets that. So don't think about actually implementing these things right now, right? You're just naming the solution. So you might conclude, well, I've got to get up earlier. That's the most obvious solution. But your brain is going to want to take off from there and say, oh, but you can't get up any earlier. You're already, getting to bed as early as you can, and you're so tired in the morning, and that's going to be so hard. You've tried getting up earlier before, and your brain is just going to do this yapping thing at you. And before you know it, you have now taken that solution and thrown it right out the window. So just think about what the solutions are. Don't think about how you're going to implement them or how hard it's going to be or what that's going to look like. None of that. You're simply thinking about what are the solutions. So when you're trying to come up with that, look for the ones that are easy to solve first when you're implementing step number 3. Another solution that you might come up with in this example is, what can you take off your morning plate to put on your evening plate instead? Ask yourself this question. Because maybe like Yvonne, the one I told you about who had worked with my planning system and discovered, I'm asking myself to do the work of 5 people and there's only me. So maybe you'll discover, like she did, that she could get up earlier, right? But she also said, with all of these expectations I have for myself, this isn't possible. I'm going to have to take some of these off my plate. And I know that part of what she did, some of those things, she did move to the night before. So sometimes, what can we prep? What can we do the night before that we no longer have to do that morning? There's going to be things that don't have to be done in the morning, and they could be done the evening before. So the second kind of solution you're going to look for is that one. What can I move from the morning to the night before? That's another solution you're going to look for. A third solution you're going to look for is, what can you delegate of those things that you're trying to cram in there? What can you delegate to someone else? And delegating to someone else doesn't necessarily mean that it has to look the same. Sometimes when we're going to delegate to someone else, sometimes we need to modify a little bit. Sometimes instead of it being done this way, in order to delegate it, we need to have it done a slightly different way so that that person can do it, right? That happens sometimes when we delegate things to kids. But as you look, again, for those solutions, how can I fix this problem? What of the things that are comprising, what of the things that are making up your morning, what of those things could you delegate to someone else? Distribute differently so that things fit together better in the morning. That's what you're looking for. And the fourth solution that you might uncover here is your ability, and really where you end up saying, you know what, there are things that are going on in the morning and they just simply can't happen right now. These are things that I need to delete. I just need to take this off my list right now. In an ideal world, would this be able to happen in the morning? Yes. But in the season that I'm in right now, with the circumstances that are happening right now, this just isn't a possibility for right now. And you can also remind yourself, you know what? It's just a season and it's just a for now thing. Maybe in another month, maybe in a couple of weeks, maybe in a couple of months, I can revisit this. And I can say, is this something that we can put back into our morning now? But for right now, you might just have to delete it. So for instance, maybe in an ideal world, you would make sure that everyone has a healthy lunch to take with them wherever they're going, work, school. And so in the morning, you would kind of do that final send off and look through the lunches and stuff that people are taking to make sure that it's not just a bunch of snack food. But in reality, that's something that just has to be deleted for now because there's just not time. Again, knowing I can revisit this later and maybe it can be different. Okay? So let me give you this example. I've kind of given you little examples as we've gone, but I want to give you one example throughout all of these 3 steps. Okay, so let me give you an example. I've given you little examples along the way, but I kind of want to give you a consistent example. Okay, go through these steps with you. So, in this example, you would unpack the idea that that last 2 minutes. Here's the example: the last 2 minutes of getting everybody out the door to school is super stressful. That is a major sticking point for me. So if you discover it's that last 2 minutes, it's getting everybody out the door with the stuff they need, that is a real struggle point for me. If that's something that you uncover, and now on the right side, in that right column, you're going to say what is contributing to that hot mess that's happening the last 2 minutes you're home. What are the contributing factors to that? And some of the things that you might uncover would be, again, getting everybody actually physically out the door. Everybody isn't ready and everybody isn't there to get out the door. I'm having to chase people around. People are not where they need to be. That might be a contributing factor. You might also uncover something else that contributes to this. And part of, again, what makes people late in getting out the door is that they can't find what they need. They're scrambling around looking for this. They're scrambling around looking for that. That's contributing to the problem. And so if you discover those couple of things that are contributing to that, you can say, well, how can we make this easier? How can we make this easier? How can we make this work better? How can we make it easier for people to be where they need to be at the right time and be able to find the things that they need to find? Because I know that running around looking for things is costing us time. That's one of the big things that's making us late. So how can we make this easier? You might say things like, well, I need some sort of system, almost like a family out the door hub. I need that. I need to create something where people can put their things by the door so that they can find them. So maybe you need to create space for shoes. Maybe you need to create space for backpacks. Maybe you need to create space for car keys or whatever else it is. You just need a better system for people to be able to corral all their stuff. Your stuff belongs here instead of it not really having a home. And so it's all throughout the house somewhere. When you're done with when you've unpacked your backpack or packed it back up, it goes over here by the door so that you're not looking for it. That sort of thing. Maybe you've got a filing system for school papers that are needed, or maybe you have, again, a designated place in your refrigerator for the lunches to go so that everybody can find their lunch, right? It's kind of that family system. That might be something that you would say would be helpful. You might also say having people gather as much of their stuff the night before would actually be helpful. It would be helpful if we didn't have to find all of our things in that last 2-minute dash before we're trying to get out the door. So let me prompt my kids. Let me, again, kind of come in and guide my kids here and the night before in saying, what can we get to this area now? Because you're not going to need it. And it will just sit here until we are ready and ready to get out the door. And it's there waiting for them. You might also say, I simply need to leave more time for this step. We need to start the mad dash for getting out the door 5 minutes beforehand instead of 2. That might be the easiest solution as well. So again, that's kind of an example of going down the left column, going down the right column, and what some of the solutions could be in thinking about, again, what is the easy solution? What can I take off my morning plate, right? We kind of went through some of that as well here. So you can see how I kind of put those 4 or some of those 4 little solution helps in place. So let me just speak to this one other area, because this is something that I get asked a lot, and it might be something that you uncover as you're working through this. And that might be dragging kids out of bed. I know you might uncover dragging my kids out of bed, fighting with my kids to get them out of bed on time contributes. They're not getting up on time, but I'm already fighting with my kids to get them out of bed. How can I drag my kids out of bed? Essentially, this is a question that I get asked a lot. Well, here's how I would answer that. I would remind you that this is a them problem that is being made into a you problem. And so the solution then is to put the problem back on them. And there's no easy way to do that. And everybody's parenting style is different. But when people ask me how I would do it, here is how I answer that. I am a very natural consequence kind of parent. That is kind of my parenting style in a lot of different ways. So again, that kind of reality consequences. So for us, that might look like kids being left behind. That might look like kids going off to school hungry or without having what they need. And again, this is just my style of parenting. It's that reality-based parenting, but what's yours? So the key though is making sure that it is not a you problem, it is a them problem. But let me say this. With those natural consequences, they also need you to help them make it easier for them to get out of bed too. So how can you help them, right? As parents, we still do need to help them. So maybe you need to look at bedtime. Maybe you need to look at their alarm system, however it is they're getting themselves up. Maybe you need to look into some rewards and incentives because they do work. You can also kind of pull a life coach thing on them and ask them if they like their morning this way. How does the morning feel for you? Do you think it starts your day off well to have this chaotic, hot mess in the morning? Do you like this yelling and screaming that we're doing at each other as we're trying to find all our things and tripping over each other and realizing we're going to be late again? Does that work well for you? And if not, then ask them, well, what do you think we can do to make this better? That brainstorming together. Because in reality, we don't want to solve things for our kids. We want to give them the skills. We want to teach them to be problem solvers. It really is a skill that is learned. But overall, today, we talked about how we really want to have mornings go smoothly. Because when they go smoothly, the whole rest of the day has a higher likelihood of going smoothly as well. But it is such a common problem. It is such a common struggle where mornings are just painful. But putting in the time and really putting the things down on paper, solving the problem first on paper, and then once you understand it, then you can say, if this is the problem, now I can see some solutions. It really does work. It's worth putting in the time to sit with a piece of paper and actually work this all out. Mornings do not have to be chaotic. And now you've got some amazing tools that will help you smooth them over quite a bit. Until next time, make it an intentional day. Well, that was a lot to take in, right? But mornings are such a common problem. And it's something that I help people with all the time. And so I think this is an episode that you'll want to make sure that you bookmark, you download, you make sure that you have it ready for next time. So in our next episode, it's going to be one of our Ask a Coach episodes. And it's a good one. It's also a question I get a lot. So I thought, why not do this one? And we're going to be talking about, why do I avoid doing the quote, right stuff? Why do I avoid doing the stuff I know I need to do? That's going to be what we unpack on the next episode. I'll see you then.